Hey guys, and welcome to Ellechat. My name is Lauren Hooker. I'm the graphic designer and founder of Ellen Company, and I host this weekly webinar for creative entrepreneurs each week on Thursdays. And I just switched the time to 3 o'clock p.m. Eastern time to try to accommodate more people and allow more of you to join in live. Because I love for this chat, even though it's mainly me presenting and I occasionally have other creative entrepreneurs in the industry come on for a Q&A, I love for it to be a conversation. So I would invite you to join in on the comments. Go ahead and say hello, introduce yourself there. Looks like a few of you have already found that feature, which is awesome. If you can, just let me know that you can hear me okay, that you can see me okay, that everything is good on your end before we jump in and get started to today's topic on how to stand out in an oversaturated industry. This is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart because it's allowed me to grow my business by leaps and bounds, and it's something that I really struggled with when I first started Ellen Company. But before we dive into the content, good, you can see and hear me. Awesome, great. Thank you guys for letting me know. Before we dive in, I just want to show you around Crowdcast for those of you who haven't tuned in to one of these Elechats before. You found the comments already, but there's also a section right underneath this video, this live stream, for a Q&A. So I'm going to save about 15 minutes at the end of today's Ellechat to let you ask questions and to respond to your questions. So feel free throughout this presentation if you want to go ahead and leave your questions in there. There's also a really neat feature where you can upvote other people's questions. So if you want to browse through there and see which ones you would love for me to answer, I'll answer them in order of the votes. So those are the ones that pop up first for me. There's no poll today, and there's also a share button down there too if you want to share today's Ellechat with your audience. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump in and get started. And I'm so thankful that you guys are joining in today. It's really fun to see so many of you joining in internationally. So I'm going to start with a little story, and this goes all the way back to design school. When I was in school, there was one guy in our class. Our class was fairly small. We had about 25 people in our design class. And his name was Kyle. There was that one guy who just stood out among everybody else. And he had this really distinct style. It was very modern. He was a little hipster. And all of our professors were wowed by his aesthetic and all of his designs. He put us all to shame. And we all tried to be just like Kyle. I would try to mimic his style, and I would fail miserably every time, not only in our design classes, but also in our drawing classes because he was an amazing illustrator. And what happened was I was so obsessed with trying to mimic Kyle and his aesthetic that he'd already honed in on and developed that I totally missed the mark on my own. And I got terrible grades. I got really frustrated. I almost wanted to quit design. And then I decided to stop looking at what Kyle was doing and just start to do my own thing. So I focused on my colorful feminine aesthetic. And that's when I felt freed up to do what I did and do it better. I got better grades. I started standing out among my classmates because I had my own style. And it was a huge lesson for me to learn even back then. So you would have thought I would have remembered that lesson when I started Ellen Company and started my own business and jumped into a very oversaturated industry of designers. So you would have thought that I would have tried to play up my own design style, try to come up with new ideas, try to differentiate myself. But I was so overwhelmed with trying to start my business and just learn the ins and outs that I would look to other designers to see what they were doing, to see what they were offering, to see what they were coming up with, even how they blogged, what their packages were, that I really started to just blend in with everybody else. I wasn't standing out. My business was not doing well. And it wasn't until I went back to that lesson I learned in design school of figuring out what worked for me and how I could differentiate myself, that Ellen Company began to grow. So that's why I feel so passionate about this. I hope you all are surprised by all the different ways that you can differentiate yourself in your business. And I have some slides to provide some visuals along the way. So I'm going to share my screen with you really quickly. Let's see here. Thanks for bearing with me, guys. A little tunnel vision, and we'll start here. So by the end of today's Ellechat, my goal is that you'll walk away with some ideas for how to clearly differentiate your business from other people in your industry and have some clear ideas. I'll be throwing a lot at you. So feel free to take notes as we go along too. But before we dive into those, I'm going to go over 4 surefire ways to blend in and then 4 surefire ways to stand out. But first, I want to go over the definition of 2 words. I constantly refer to the Ellen Company audience as creative entrepreneurs, and I think it's easy to lose sight of the importance of those 2 words. The first is creative, and the definition for creative is relating to or involving the imagination or original ideas, especially in the production of artistic work. Having good imagination or original ideas. I think as creative entrepreneurs, those of us who have a business and are trying to grow our business in a creative industry, it is extremely important that we differentiate ourselves. The term creative in and of itself puts an expectation on us that we should be different, that all of the designers shouldn't look the same. Their work shouldn't look the same. Their offerings shouldn't look the same. Photographers, it shouldn't all be the same. The fact that you're in a creative field already tells you that you're a creative person. So that creativity should transfer over into all areas of your business. And that's my challenge to you today. The second word, entrepreneur, another word that should challenge you to set your business apart. An entrepreneur is a person who starts a business and is willing to risk loss in order to make money. One who organizes, manages, and assumes the risk of a business or enterprise. So as creative entrepreneurs, originality is even more crucial for us. You have to be willing to take risks when you're differentiating yourself. You have to be willing to try new things. If you're going to call yourself a creative entrepreneur, not just a business person, you have to be willing to step outside of your comfort zone and take risks in order to differentiate yourself. If there's no real risk and there's no creativity, then you're not a creative entrepreneur. If you aren't innovative, you aren't coming up with new ideas, you can't use that term. So how do we fill up that role as creative entrepreneurs and really differentiate ourselves? Now, today in the tips that I'm going to give you, they're going to be tips and pointers to help you stand out, but you have to do the hard work of putting your creativity on it and really making it your own. I wish that I could just sit back and give you all the answers. Don't we all wish that? But you're going to have to experiment. You're going to have to try things out based on your audience, your expertise, your strengths, and your creativity. So that's my little challenge to you before we even dive in, is to take those risks if you in a creative field and use your creativity to your advantage. So we're going to start with 4 surefire ways to blend into your industry. And the first is to look to others for inspiration and ideas. I'm reading a book by Steve Toback right now called Real Leaders Don't Follow, and I'd highly recommend it. And in it, he says, nobody ever changed the world by doing what everyone else is doing. Leaders lead, followers follow. You can't be both. Leaders lead, followers follow. You can't be both. So the way for you to set yourself apart and differentiate your business is never by following. If someone's already doing it, you either need to do it, but do it differently, do it, but do a really great job at it. You have to find a way to differentiate it if you're going to stand out in your industry. But you'll never get there by following. Followers are always one step behind. You'll never get ahead by following what other people are doing. And looking to others is really the easy way out. It's lacking that creativity piece that I talked about a second ago. We either copy people or look to others for ideas when we don't want to put in the work, or we doubt our abilities, or maybe even it's a little bit of both. But if you're a creative entrepreneur, you have to be willing to put in the work, and you have to highlight your abilities. Going back to doubting your abilities, I think too many of us look to others in our field and compare and say, well, they're better at this than I am, or they have more experience in this than I do. You can't have that mentality. You still have something to offer, whether you just started or you've been in it for 5 years. That shouldn't stunt your creativity or keep you from coming up with new ideas. It's good to look to what's worked for other people, but not to copy it outright or use that as the easy way out. It's going to take some work on your part. And another insight on this is that when you're mimicking someone else, you end up hurting both the person you're copying and yourself. Some say, and I've been guilty of saying this myself, but it's not true. They say that copying is the highest form of flattery, that someone would like what you do so much that they try to copy it themselves. But it's extremely frustrating for those who've worked hard to differentiate themselves. Think about it. If you put all the hard work into coming up with a really great concept and you do it well, and then someone swoops in and copies it, it's really frustrating. So if you wouldn't want that to be done to you, don't do it to other people. Don't negate what they've done. Don't try to play it off as your own, because it's insulting and it's frustrating to the person on the other end. And not only that, but even more so, it's a disservice to your own creativity and your own gifts that you have. So I would encourage you, if you're tempted to look at others in your industry, maybe stop following along with them. Or just take a hiatus from following along with them for a while. Also, because people will notice when you copy. So if you're following along with someone too closely and you're copying things that they do, your audience might start to call you out on it. And as a creative entrepreneur, that can really harm your creative business as well. So the one surefire way, and this is the biggest one, to not let your business stand out from the rest is to copy other people and look to them for inspiration and ideas. So don't do yourself that disservice, and don't do that to someone else. Second, the second surefire way to blend in is to not fix a problem that your audience is facing. So ideas catch on when they meet a need or a want. You should always keep your audience in mind and ask yourself how what you're offering will benefit them. People also tend to think that entrepreneurs are their own boss. And the truth is that your audience is your boss. Your clients and your customers are your boss. They determine if what you're doing succeeds. If they like what you're doing, they'll purchase from you. If they don't like what you're doing, they won't. So you always have to keep your audience in mind and realize that the answer to standing out in your industry is meeting a need. If you think of the people that you follow along with most in any industry, they're probably meeting some need of yours, whether it's entertainment, education, whatever it might be, they're meeting your need. So if you're going to stand out, that has to be right there at the center of it. You have to always be fixing a problem or answering a problem that your audience is facing. And many times the answer to standing out is found here. It's when I started focusing on how to solve the problem my audience was facing that I started to come up with different ideas for Ellen Company to help it stand out. So realizing that creative entrepreneurs needed, at that time, someone to share transparently. And so I started sharing transparently on the blog, which wasn't always done by designers at that time. So I would encourage you to set aside some time away from social media, away from the internet, and write down the struggles your audience is facing right now. And then, without considering what's already being done in your industry to solve those problems, I want you to go through and brainstorm ways that your business might be able to solve those problems based on your skill set and the resources that are available to you. Use your creativity to come up with solutions, and I can almost guarantee you that you'll come up with something different than what's already being done. So the first surefire way to blend in was looking to others. The second one is not fixing a problem your audience is facing. And the third one kind of plays off of number 2, and that's, if you want to blend in, make everything all about you. I've asked a lot of my branding clients and even a lot of Ellen Company blog readers this one pressing question, and I'm going to ask it to you all too. What sets your business apart from others in your industry? Many people will tell me that they won't say that a product sets them apart. They won't say that their process sets them apart or their brand. They'll tell me that they are the key thing that sets their business apart. And while we would all hope that that could be the one thing to work for them, the hard truth is that you have to give people a reason to care about you. When you first start your business, you're a stranger to someone else. Or when someone comes into contact with your business for the first time, you're a stranger. And I ran into this problem too when I first started Ellen Company. I thought that if I was putting myself out there, that people would care to know about what I do when I'm not designing, or what, I don't know, you name it, what I was wearing, what I was eating. And I would share all of those things on the blog. But the reality was, people didn't care about that. I had to give them a reason to care. If you think about the people that you follow along with most, they're probably really great at what they do. They've differentiated themselves in some way to make you care about the little things like what their favorite ice cream flavor is or where they go on vacation. If it's a stranger, you won't care about that. And it's a hard truth to come to grips with, but it's important to find other ways to differentiate yourself other than your personality, which can be a great thing, but unless it's really quirky or off the wall or really different from everything else out there, you're going to have a really hard time differentiating yourself. Jake and I like to watch Jim Gaffigan, and he, in one of his stand-up routines, he points out a truthful fact that people only want to look at a photo if they're in it or they can see themselves in it. If you have to look at photos of a random family on vacation, you're going to lose interest pretty quickly. And the same is true for your business. Unless people can see what's in it for them, they aren't going to be interested. People aren't going to care, like I said, about your favorite ice cream or what you do on the weekends. You have to give them a reason to care. So if you're the only difference and the only thing that separates you from your competition, unless you have blue hair, an extremely off-the-wall personality, or an incredible life story, you're going to struggle to stand out in your industry. So focus again on your audience, and I'm going to share some really great ways to stand out in just a moment. That'll help you with not making everything all about you. And number 4 is to stay inside of your comfort zone. You're never going to stand out if you're stuck in your comfort zone. New ideas require taking risks, and that's part of being an entrepreneur. The saying is no risk, no reward, and it's very true. And this isn't just at first. This is going to be ongoing for the lifespan of your business. So I remember telling Jake when I first started Ellen Company and I was putting in tons of work and I was really struggling to differentiate myself, I told him that I just wanted my business. I couldn't wait until my business got to a normal place and became more of a routine and I didn't have to strive so much. And he told me another hard truth, that if my business became too comfortable, that's when my business was going to die. You can kind of think of it like a basketball game. This analogy was helpful for me. And as long as you're in business, the clock is going to be running and the game is going to be playing. And you have the choice of whether you're going to sit on the bench or get in the game and play. If you sit on the bench, those are the people who stay inside their comfort zone. They're wearing the uniform, they look the part, but they're not playing the game. They're not seeing any success from it. Those who are in the game are the ones who are constantly working. They can't just sit down and stop dribbling. They have to keep going, and that's true for your business too. You're never going to stand out if you're playing it safe and sitting on the sidelines, and you're never going to get to a place where things are super comfortable and it's really easy and you're not going to have to differentiate yourself anymore. You're always going to have to be playing that game. But you can look at this negatively and be a Debbie Downer about it, or you can get excited because as a creative, this gives you an opportunity to do something new and to consistently be coming up with new ideas. I don't know about you, but I get very bored with just a normal routine or the same kind of, if I had to work with one client all the time and stay inside that brand, I would get really bored. Thankfully, as a creative entrepreneur, you're always coming up with new ideas, and you always get to be doing something different, and that's kind of required. So a surefire way to blend in is to stay inside of your comfort zone. I encourage you to take risks, to experiment. Everybody goes through an experimental phase at some point to figure out what works and what doesn't work for their business. And some people's experimental phase may be 5 minutes and somebody else's might be 5 years. And that's just kind of how it goes, figuring out what works. And you might fail, you might try some things and fail, but that's normal too. So if you don't have any risk, you won't have the opportunity to have any reward from it. So don't sit on the sidelines, get in the game, and keep in mind that you're going to have to continue to come up with new ideas all the time to stand out. So now that I've been a Debbie Downer and ways to blend in, let's go through 4 surefire ways that you can stand out in your industry. And the first one is through differentiating your offerings. How do your products and your services set you apart from other people in your industry? So, and there's a couple different ways you can go with this. You can think of it broadly about what makes your products and your services unique, but there's a lot of different aspects of that. So what materials do you use to produce your product or your service? That might set your offerings apart right there and set your business apart. For example, for my brand and web design services, I only work with Squarespace. That sets me apart. That's helped me differentiate myself from others in the industry. So those that know they definitely want to work with Squarespace are more familiar that I work with Squarespace. So that's helped me set my services apart. Other businesses choose to go all organic or all natural or gluten-free or diet specific with different food blogs. So to differentiate your offerings, you might think about what materials you use or what programs you use or the different components of what make up your products and services. You might choose to differentiate those to make your product or your service really unique and in turn make your business really unique. You might think about where your profits go once people purchase your products or your services or book your services. You might take a portion of everything that all the money you bring in, and you might give it to 10% of that could go towards stopping human trafficking, or another great, what's the word I'm looking for? I was going to say ministry, but you get what I'm saying. You can give it away to charity, charitable organization. That's what I was going for. Like Tom's, the shoes. Every pair that someone purchases, they give a pair of shoes to someone in a third world country. So you can think about differentiating your products and your services in that way with where your profits are going. You can think about how many products you offer. Are you unique because you offer several products or you offer just one? So for me, I only offer one design package. That could set my business apart from other designers who offer several design services. So that can make your product or your service unique. How do you offer your service or product, or how often do you offer it? Do you offer it once a year? so people can only book once a year or only purchase once a year? Or do you make it available all year round? And that's how you differentiate it. Marie Forleo only offers her B School, her business class, once a year. And that sets her apart from others because everyone gets so excited that it only comes around once a year. Or you can make things available all year round. So time can play a part in how you differentiate your products and services. How many packages do you have? Do you have a bunch of different offerings for your services, or do you only have one offering? How customizable are your packages or your services? That could differentiate it. And most noticeably, what unique products or services can you offer that aren't being offered already? So, throughout every step of the process for you creating your offering, whether it's a product or a service, an app, an e-course, whatever it might be, think about how you might be able to differentiate it in a way that your audience would be on board with and be excited about, in a way that's answering one of their problems, in a way that, given your skill set and your resources, that you can feasibly create. But think about how you can differentiate it along the way. A couple examples of this. One is Kayla Itzines, I think is how you say it. I've been saying it Kayla Itzines for about a year now. She is in the health and wellness industry. She sells these 12-week guides that are purely PDF guides, and they have different exercises on them. It's a really simple idea, but that product has set her apart from all the other health plans and diets and exercise fitness plans out there. She specialized those products to be young women in their 20s. That's her main audience. And she's grown to millions and millions of followers this way, just through her guides. So she made it wasn't a really hard concept with these PDFs, but it's been highly successful. So she thought of ways that she could differentiate herself from others in her industry. Another one is Shay Cochran. She was pretty much, I don't know if there's anyone before her, the one to really take off in styled stock photography. She took all of these photos, mainly aerial photos, that people could put their products into. And for people who didn't have a lot of money to work with a photographer or didn't feel comfortable with their own photography skills, she solved that need through her product. And it was simple, just stock photos. People can buy them again and again. But she saw a need, and she saw a need among female entrepreneurs, and she met that need through her stock photos. So there are several ways that you can differentiate your business through what you're offering. But maybe your offering is very similar to others in your industry, and you've thought of ways to differentiate it, but there's really no avoiding the key similarities. That's okay. I would encourage you to even differentiate yourself through your process. So it doesn't mean that you can't differentiate your offerings in other ways. You might differentiate how you come up with that offering or how you provide that offering. One of the key ways that I set Ellen Company apart in terms of my design services was through my 2-week process. I thought about the process that other people in the design industry had, and it went on for weeks and weeks. I hated working with multiple clients at a time because it was stressful to keep up with everyone. And so my husband threw it out there. He said, why not just take on one client at a time for 2 weeks? And I thought he was crazy because I hadn't seen it done before. And then the more and more I thought about it, the more and more I realized that it was possible. And so I just took a risk and put it out there. And it worked. And it helped differentiate me from others out there. My clients loved it. It was successful. So you might think about how you could differentiate your process if you offer a service. You might think about time frame like I did and see how quickly you can get a deliverable to your client or your customer. But you also might consider client involvement. Maybe that's the way that you separate or differentiate your business from other businesses in your industry. Maybe you do everything all yourself and take care of all the details for your clients, depending on what you offer. Or maybe you differentiate yourself by allowing your client to be more involved. Think through the ways that you can differentiate your process in a way that works for you and meets the needs of your clients, but is very different from what other people are doing. You might also differentiate your process by coming up with ways to make your client process, or your client experience rather, unique. So what incentives or surprises are you going to offer them throughout the client process? Do they get a special treatment somehow? How can you differentiate that client experience for your clients, and maybe even through your customers, depending on what you're selling? So you can differentiate through your offerings, and you can differentiate through your process, but you can also differentiate through your marketing strategies and your marketing techniques. How can you use your blog, your social media accounts, your newsletter, or other outlets, even like this webinar, to set your business apart? What content are you sharing? What quality content are you sharing? When I first started Ellen Company, like I said a moment ago, my blog was a key way that I could separate myself from others in the industry and differentiate through content marketing. And so I started sharing posts about topics like social media and how to design a website and about branding, so that I could appeal to my ideal clients. And I saw content marketing being done in other industries. I hadn't seen it done in the design industry, and so I took it and ran with it. So I stopped sharing about personal posts and the things that interested me, and I started sharing more about topics that would interest my ideal clients. And it was sharing transparently that kind of set me apart at the outset. So think through how you're utilizing your blog. What are you sharing? You can really differentiate yourself from others in your industry there. You might differentiate yourself through your newsletter and the content that you're sharing with your mailing list each week. You might differentiate through a podcast, if nobody else in your industry is doing a podcast, or through the content you're sharing in your podcast. That might differentiate you. Constantly be thinking about what can set you apart, even in the way that you're sharing content with your audience. So does the type of content you share set you apart? Does the quality of the content that you're sharing set you apart? Are you going above and beyond and sharing really high quality stuff that isn't being seen in your industry? Does the quantity of your content set you apart? Are you sharing more posts and that sets you apart, or maybe even less? Who knows? Does that set you apart from other people in your industry? Maybe even the types of posts that you're sharing. So examples of this, one of them is the skim. The skim is news for women, in particular, women on the go. So what the skim does is they round up all of the latest news, and they send it to your inbox every morning. So you can pull it up and you can see the latest news all at a glance. They compile it for you and make it easy to understand as well. So the way that they market their information, they do it through their mailing list, and they have people subscribe. And every morning they send that content. They differentiated themselves with the concept of their product and what they're offering, but also how they're getting it to people. They aren't expecting people to come to their blog or their website. They're sending it to them every morning. So that's how they were able to differentiate themselves. Another one that I love, and it's highly addicting, is Tasty, and it's only on Facebook, I think. BuzzFeed. Tasty comes from the people at BuzzFeed, but they share really simple recipes, or they make it look simple, because they share an aerial view, and it's through a video of how to create these recipes. So you don't have to follow text directions. You can actually see how the recipe is being made. It's genius. So they're separating themselves and differentiating themselves from other food blogs out there through video and the type of content that they're sharing. It's brilliant. So how could you do that? How might you use video or photos or whatever it might be to market what you're offering? Your offering might not be that different. Your process might not be that different, but the way that you share it with people might be very different and help set yourself apart. So something to think about. Now, so we've talked about setting yourself apart through your product, your process, your marketing strategies. And fourthly, you can really differentiate yourself through your brand. I put this one last for a special reason. Your brand is one of the biggest ways that you can set yourself apart, especially through a first impression, because visuals send a message really quickly. However, if there's no substance behind those visuals and no key difference behind even those visuals, then it's going to fall flat. It's like putting makeup on a pig. You can make it look nicer, it's still a pig. So you might have a business that really blends in, and you can help it stand out through a great brand. But if there's nothing else to differentiate it behind that brand, you're still going to struggle. So for my personal design experience, it's always been easier to design a brand for a business that has already set themselves apart through their products, through their process. If they've already developed those key differences, it's easier to brand for them. But if you've already developed those key differences, you can further set yourself apart through your brand. And there's several ways that you can do this. You can do it visually through the photos that you take and the style of photos that you take. You can do it through your graphics. Your color palette, the colors that you use often can help set your brand apart. If you think about UPS, FedEx, and USPS, all of those services do the same thing. All of those businesses do the same thing. They help you send packages and send mail. And really their services and their offerings don't differ very much, but their brands are entirely different. And the color palette for each one of those brands is entirely different. USPS has red, white, and blue. It's very patriotic. FedEx is purple and orange. And then UPS is brown and yellow. So the color palettes are extremely different, but they help to differentiate those three businesses from each other. You can differentiate visually through the fonts that you choose, maybe through your illustrations or icons on your website, through patterns, through blog graphics. Anything like that will help you set your brand apart, set your business apart rather, through your brand. But there's another component of branding that isn't often considered, but it's just as huge as the visual side, and that's through intangibles like tone, terminology, and the phrases that you use. So a brand is the entire experience. It's not just those visuals. So it's also seen through the terminology that you use in your business. If you think about Starbucks, they even have their own kind of language for their products. They have a tall, a grande, a venti, they have their frappuccinos. They have those terms that are familiar to their business and their business alone. So what are the terms that you're using for your business and for your brand? How can you use those to set yourself apart and come up with a tone of voice that is distinctly your own, that can help you differentiate your business from others in your industry? You might think about Apple products. They're all named iPhone, iPad, iPod, MacBook, iMac. They have their own language. So think about how you can infuse that into your own business and your own brand. You might also think about phrases. Like I think about Emerald every time I think about phrases. I think about Emerald, the chef on TV, and his signature phrase was "bam." You might come up with those signature phrases for your audience. And in terms of visual aesthetic and even tone and just your brand in general, I would highly recommend that if you want to differentiate yourself, that you stay away from trends. Following trends is, again, following and not leading. And it's not very creative if you're following the trends. An example of this, and I wish I had added a slide in here, was for the Bloom Workshop, one of my clients, and they really wanted a calligraphy logo. Not that there's anything wrong with a calligraphy logo, but for them, other similar workshops had calligraphy logos. So instead, I surprised them and we took a very different approach because I wanted to help them stand out and differentiate themselves visually through their brand. So another example of this would be Kimra Luna. She's another great resource for creative entrepreneurs. You can see right off the get-go that her brand is very different. Even the background, it's not a white, bright background like a lot of websites out there. It's darker. She has blue hair. She's just very different. She looks very different in and of herself. Her personal brand is very different, and it helps her to stand out. She also stands out through her offerings and other components of her business, but her brand just takes it to a whole other level. And with a name like Kimra Luna, that's very distinctive as well. So she does a great job of standing out and attracting a certain type of audience. And she has a really cool story. So if you haven't heard of her, you need to go check her out. Another one, another creative that I love following along with is Paul Jarvis. This is a look at his website. He has a great newsletter every week, which is one way that he differentiates himself. He calls it the Sunday Dispatches, and it's specifically for creatives and how you can make a living from your hobbies and what you love. But if you'll notice that little pink rat at the top left, that's part of Paul's brand. He has rats as pets. He makes that known, and he even calls his followers, I think, his rats. I think there's a special name for it. But it goes to show his terminology and what people associate with Paul. He's done really well at differentiating himself through his brand, like that little rat up there in the top left corner, but also how he's marketing his business and the things that he offers. So he's a great person to look to as well. So it takes time. And like I said before, you're going to have to put in the work. And you're going to have to try by trial and error to see what sticks. You're going to have to constantly come up with new ideas. But it is very possible for you to set yourself apart through your products, through your process, through your marketing strategies and your brand. There are many ways that you can start to differentiate yourself from others in your industry, even if there are millions upon millions of people who seem to do exactly what you do. So I'm going to turn it back around now. And let's see here. Where are we? Coming back. Okay. Now I can see you all again. But yes, so, and actually what's interesting about this whole setting yourself apart concept is that the more you set yourself apart, the less relevant the competition is. If you're doing something distinctly different and distinctly your own that nobody else is doing, you won't have any competition to worry about because your idea is totally unique. So I would encourage you to use your creativity, use those creative gifts you've been given, not only in the services that you provide, whether it's photography or a food blog or design work or website development, whatever it might be. Start to use it in the strategies of your business as well. If you're having trouble finding what makes you different and you're really struggling with this, ask somebody outside of your industry, maybe a very business-minded person that you know, to point out those differences in you. Sometimes it's hard to see the forest through the trees. So for me, that was Jake, my husband. He was able to say, why don't you start separating yourself through your process? Or why don't you start separating yourself through content marketing? So it was really helpful to have his insight and have an objective point of view to differentiate myself. So I'm excited about this topic. I'm going to jump into your questions now. So if you have any as we go, or comments or topics that you want to leave in the Q&A section, feel free. I'll spend the next about 15 minutes, if I don't finish up before then, answering your questions. So great. I'm going to start with Suzanne. Suzanne says, I would like to have some great suggestions on how to get a foot inside for someone just starting out a business. I know blogging about the topics is great, and I'll do that, but how do you start selling your skills and knowledge for your clients? Do you start working for free for people you know to get some work to show? This may be a way inside, but maybe it's difficult to attract the exact kind of work or clients you want to more of this way. Okay, so how do you get started? and start differentiating yourself right out the gate. Blogging is a great way to do that and increase exposure, but it's also helpful depending on the services that you're offering to get your foot in the door with people. John Acuff actually sent out an email this morning in his newsletter regarding selling your products or offering your services for free. And he had some great insights on that. I wish I had pulled it up for you, Suzanne. I may even send it to you because I do have your email. But I would be a little bit leery about that. And here's why. You want people to, I remember my dad said this. My dad owned a business as well. And I would always ask him for advice at the outset. What are your biggest pieces of advice? And he said, make it worth your while. So if you're doing it for free, it might not be worth your while. If it is worth your while to have that portfolio item, then you might consider doing it for free. But whatever you're doing, make it worth your while. If you really don't want to take on that project, or if it's something that is going to take a lot of work on your end, then at least charge a little bit for it. And then you can start to increase along the way as the word starts to spread about your business. But I would definitely consider charging, even if it's just a little. You'll find that the people who are willing to charge you or willing to pay for your services are those who are going to take you seriously. If someone's looking for a deal and they're looking for something for free, they aren't going to take you seriously or appreciate what you do. So make it worth your while would be my advice. I did some free work and it ended up being some of the most frustrating work. And I did my best work when I knew I was getting paid for it. There was another expectation there as well. Now, I've done things that for organizations that I'm really passionate about, and I've done free work for that. It was worth my while because it was a cause that was near and dear to my heart. So that might make it worth your while too, but whatever you do, make it worth your while. Great question. Chris asks, how would you suggest creating content for an industry you serve, but you're not an expert in yourself? I love that you asked this question, Chris. You do not have to be an expert to share what you know. If you've learned something new every day, you can share and teach something new every day. Start with what you know. You have to understand too that the people who are in your industry aren't necessarily your audience or your clients. So your audience or your clients, like mine, don't know anything about brand or design. If they did, they wouldn't be coming to me. So I shared what I knew about logo design, what I knew about pulling together a color palette. And as I learned, I started to share more. So as I worked with clients and learned more about the client process, I started to share it on the blog. As I learned more about social media and what worked for my business, I shared it on the blog. You don't have to be an expert. You don't have to be in business for 50 years before you start sharing. The truth is that industries are constantly changing. Just when you feel like you have it all figured out, you won't. It'll change. So share what you know. You have to start somewhere. And if you don't start sharing what you know, I feel like you might become an expert later, but you won't have the audience there. So just start sharing. And yeah, I hope that's helpful for you. I think you'll be surprised at how much you do know. I think when you're in your industry, you're in that industry, you see all that you don't know. I think you'd be surprised with what you do. Great question. All right, Sarah asks, what advice would you give to someone starting out in the design world and overwhelmed with all the things they could do, having a hard time getting started? She says she's a recent college graduate working full time, and she would like to professionally position her side hustle, graphic design business. Great question, Sarah. I think, like I said, everybody goes through an experimental phase of what works and what doesn't. For me, I started out designing wedding invitations and designing prints, both of which I really didn't enjoy doing, but I found out because I started designing them and realized that very quickly. And I realized that for me, it was hard to come up or bring in a profit through those services. So I knew with branding and design, I was being paid more for my time. Whereas with the other products, I wasn't getting paid as much for my time, or I wasn't able to charge enough for my time. if that makes sense. So I would think about, what do you enjoy doing and what can feasibly make you money and bring in a consistent income? Because while you may love designing and doing what you're doing, in order to have a profitable business, you have to be making money in order to keep doing it. So think about what you love and what brings in a consistent income and what you can feasibly live off of doing. Great question. All right, Chris said, hi, my question is similar to Suzanne's, working for free and attracting clients. I switched careers from higher education and completing my first year in business as an executive coach. My services and content are strong, but my social media presence is abysmal. Looking for advice to develop a solid digital presence without being cookie cutter. That's hard, and it could take a lot of different forms. I would say to start out small. So start out with 1 or 2 platforms and put time and effort into there. It can be really overwhelming if you're trying to do 5 social media platforms at once. Where does your audience hang out? So I would guess as an executive coach, they may hang out on LinkedIn, and you might be surprised at how many hang out on Twitter. I would be really surprised if they're on Pinterest or Instagram as much. So you might start there. And for LinkedIn, they allow you to share articles and helpful information like that. So you might share helpful articles that you've written, and you might share helpful articles that are pertinent to that industry. It just depends on where you feel like your strengths are, and think about how you can play those up for your social media presence. It doesn't have to look, not every part of your business has to look super different. Just some key aspects of your business need to look different. So I would say consistency is key. I don't know if you have a blog or if you're thinking about doing that, but that's a great way to funnel people back to your website and back to your services. So using LinkedIn and Twitter maybe to funnel people back in would be great as well, Chris. I hope that answered your question. If not, feel free to leave another one and I'll go into more detail. Another Chris says, I'm restarting my own graphic design studio. I'm working on my new branding and website. After everything is done, what is the first step to spread the word? It depends on where your audience is. The first step to spread the word, and I'm a little biased, I actually had a blog post on this today on the Ellen Company website. Blogging is huge. Blogging brings people back to your home base. Your website is your home base. It's where your products are. It's where your services are. It's where the money comes in. Everything else, your social media accounts, your newsletter, all of that should funnel back. So I would say spread the word through sharing blog posts. Maybe do a blog post about your brand and your website, especially if you're a graphic designer, to share what went into all of that and the decisions that you made, depending on what your offering is too. And if you want to highlight those components and highlight that design work. But I would start building your mailing list of really loyal customers. So everybody who comes back, trying to point them to a mailing list. And I would definitely spread the word up and down on social media to create hype. I also have a blog post on the Ellen Company site. It's an older one, but if you look it up in the search engine, you can find it, how to create hype around a launch. Check it out. You might find it helpful. Great question. I can take a few more. We have a little bit of time. Sandra says she's a fashion illustrator that struggles with standing out in a crowded field of illustrators and other artists. How can I stand out among so many artists? I would go back to all of those things that I just covered. I think Sandra asked this before the webinar. My cat's right in the way. I apologize. I would think about your products and your services, how you can differentiate those. How you might even narrow down your niche or narrow down what you're sharing through your fashion illustration. So you might just focus on evening wear, or you might focus on a certain type of fashion, maybe to separate yourself. Specializing can be a great way to separate yourself and differentiate your business too. I hope that's helpful, Sandra. All right. Wendy says, writing is already such an oversaturated market in all genres. Cover art is one way to stand out, but still has to fit the current popular look of a genre? What else might an author be able to do to stand out from the crowd? That's where tone and terminology can really come in handy. Your writing style would be a great way to stand out. The genre, even if it isn't for the cover art for the genre that you're in might help you stand apart, or spin on that genre might help you stand apart. But I would definitely say your writing style, and maybe even depending on what kind of writing you do, you might set yourself apart through your offerings and your process. Maybe your writing process is what separates you and helps you stand apart. But yes, tone and terminology could be a huge one as well. Hope that's helpful for you too, Wendy. All right. Janelle asks, should you be building up a following before you start offering services and products? I love this question. Yes. A lot of creative entrepreneurs struggle because they have a product or a service and they create it and they put all this work into creating it, and then they sit back and go, oh no, how do I find people that are actually going to buy this? So then they try to find people who are going to buy it. Whereas if you develop an audience and you build an audience first, whether it's through your newsletter, your blog, your social media accounts, you'll have more success at launching a product because you'll be able to know what your audience wants because you've been getting to know them. A lot of times your audience will ask you for something. They'll flat out ask you for a certain service or a product. I know I didn't even have Adobe Illustrator on the radar to teach a class on that, but I had people ask me, and so I taught a class on it, and it sold out in 15 minutes, and I was stunned. So when you build your audience first, they'll tell you what they want. You'll be able to give them a product or a service that they want, and then you'll have a captive audience to sell to. So yes, you're making it 1,000 times easier on yourself if you focus on building your audience first before creating any products or services. Fantastic question, Janelle. All right, this is the last question and it's perfect timing. Tips on naming your business, using your own name versus something else. What's the story behind the name of Ellen Company? Naming businesses is so hard, Sarah. I'm sure you get that as well. When I was looking for a name for Ellen Company, my last name is Hooker. A lot of designers choose their name, but I knew Lauren Hooker Design, it might be memorable, but I didn't really want a negative connotation associated with my business. Love my husband. I'm not ashamed of my last name, just didn't want to use it as a business name. I was trying to think long term about what I wanted my business name to be. I wanted it to sound feminine. I wanted it to include a name. L kind of goes along with my name. My name is Lauren Elizabeth, so the L and the L seemed to fit. It was classy and feminine, and it also gave me room to grow. So I knew that if I ever wanted to bring anybody else on board, if it was under my name, it would be really hard to pass it off or have it be seen as a team, but under Ellen Company, it would give me room to grow. I would encourage you to just go through and write down, fill up pages of keywords and ideas and start to fit them together even. Think about the long term. Think about names that aren't being seen in your industry. And yeah, I'm terrible with naming. So I might not be the best person to ask. That might be a really good Ellechat topic down the road. Bring in an expert that is really great on this topic. But yes, great question, Sarah. I hope that's helpful. All right. Well, sorry, cat's in the lap. I told you this is a very informal weekly webinar. I hope that you all enjoyed it. I hope you're able to take some great insights away. I would love to hear about how you end up differentiating your business or what you did take away. Feel free to send me an email or leave a comment here. I would love to hear it. We're going to be switching up next week's Ellechat. I'm joining in an Ellechat with Mariah Cause, or it's not an Ellechat, it's a webinar with Mariah Cause that I'll be sending details out next Thursday at 1 o'clock. And then in 2 weeks, we'll be back on the regular Ellechat schedule. But I'll keep you all posted. Thank you again for tuning in. I hope that you all have a great afternoon, day, night, whatever time it is there. And I hope to see you in another Ellechat soon. Best wishes with differentiating yourself. Bye, guys.